name is Jeanette. I grew up on Turner Street in East Taunton, Massachusetts, directly across the street from the backside of Massasoit State Park. The house I lived in and grew up in was terrifying. We always heard footsteps. There were visible apparitions and unexplainable happenings. My sister's experience was far worse than what I experienced. Her story is told in the book Our Neighborhood Ghost, Hauntings in Middleborough, Lakeville, and Their Neighbors by Edward and Yolanda Landy. When you speak of the Bridgewater Triangle, all you think about and focus on is the Hobblecock Swamp area in the Freetown Forest. But I've spent most of my life inside the woods of Massasoit's Forest to know that there is plenty of unexplainable activity happening there, but you never hear of what happened in those woods. There has been 3 suicides, 2 of them were my relatives, 2 drownings, 1 was a relative of mine, several plane crashes, 2 I know were fatalities, and could be more, but those are deaths I know. Also, in the early 90s, my father, while hunting, found several small animals skinned and hanging from the trees. I myself, in 1999, in a small patch of pine trees, is what we called the field, across the street from my house. I found a beagle whose front of his snout was cut off and he was tied to one of the pine trees. I was 12 years old when I discovered him, and as you can imagine, when you unexpectedly walk into something like that, it's something you will never forget. My father had called the Taunton Animal Control to come get it, and he had me show him where the dog was. But the worst part was, a few days later I went back and walked right back into the same beagle. The animal control officer never removed his body. I had nightmares of the disturbing image, and as an animal lover, I felt badly, wondering why and whom would do something so gruesome to an innocent animal. For many of years in a certain area in the woods off Turner Street, I have always felt an unwelcoming feeling overcome me. The emotions were so heavy, I felt as I was being watched and so scared, I literally had chills down my spine and goosebumps. I've always questioned those feelings till the day we were confirmed. In September 2012, I was on a bike ride with my daughter, who was 5 years old at the time. We were riding through that area. I had already felt as I was being watched. But all of a sudden, my daughter nervously said, "Mama, I'm scared." As soon as I questioned her why, she began to break out in tears. She was so in fear, she stated, "I feel like someone's watching me." Right then and there, as we continued to head to the road, Turner Street, I called my fiance, telling him, in relief, knowing someone else felt what I could feel. What just happened? My daughter was such in a panic. He could hear her screaming and crying over the phone. Recently, my older sister told me right in that area, a man drove his Jeep down there and shot himself, committing suicide. She told me this took place when she was a teenager. We grew up in the same house, but there is an 18-year age difference between us. Recently, August 19, 2013, I was riding the trails on my dirt bike. Haven't rode there in 10 years. I was filming my riding with a GoPro HD camera. In one area in the middle of the woods, I stopped due to a tree across the path. I thought I heard someone talking in my video. I responded to the voice. I hear by looking around the area. I studied that area of the video several times because I knew something was not right. I found what appears to be a voice. I slow down the audio and I hear an unexplainable sound that appears to be a faint voice, as if it's speaking in whisper. Especially when I hear this voice at the part of the video. I turn around trying to listen. It's pretty amazing, considering I sent just the audio to a few people, not telling them what it was, and I was amazed when they heard exactly what I heard. Now, with all this negative energy that has occurred, I can imagine there is plenty of unexplainable events that take place there. Where I grew up, those part of the woods are unused. They are becoming overgrown. Some paths don't even exist anymore. It's amazing, since we moved from that area in October of 2000, my friends and I still rode dirt bikes and walked those woods until 2004. Since then, that area is really no longer in use or explored. When people come and visit now what is only a day area park, they normally stay on the campground side of Massasoit Park. I would just love to have someone come to the area of the park where I used to live. I would think that with that many deaths in just such a small area of woods, there is something definitely negative on that side. What it is, I do not know, and I would like to. I've been trying many years to have someone do paranormal investigations, but I haven't had any success. I grew up in those woods and could walk through with my eyes closed and never get lost. Those woods meant a lot to me, and I enjoyed being there. I wanted to bring my daughter up and make new memories and have her enjoy that place just as much as I did as a child. But now, I feel uncomfortable, and my daughter is terrified to go to that side of the woods. My daughter is 6 years old, and I know she can feel energy. My family and I lived in these ascent days, and my daughter is also uncomfortable and wants to leave when I bring her to the ascent ledge. I respect everyone that is researching what is going on around these areas. I know some people brush happenings off and say it's all a story. I lived through too many of these happenings, even to the point it's changed my life, and now my daughter is starting to have experiences. So my hat is tipped to all of you, and thank you for reading my story. Story number 2. I guess I've had so many of these experiences that I forgot to write about Paul Deaver, an insane asylum or whatever they call it now. There's about 100 different names for it. I had a friend that was obsessed with this place and finding some secret tunnel he was convinced was actually there. I guess I was a bit of a troublemaker because it didn't even occur to me that I was trespassing as well as breaking and entering. I'd gone many times, sometimes with a few people, sometimes with a dozen or so. Depends if we were drinking or not. I must have gone into these buildings a half a dozen times or more. 2 times stand out to me. One time, we found the underground tunnel that connects many, if not all, the buildings. It's pretty weird. In the tunnels would be dead cats everywhere. I remember in one building we found papers scattered everywhere. When I picked them up off the floor, I found it to be patience files. They were just thrown about across every room in no order. Filing cabinets knocked over. I wish I remembered exactly what sign of them said, but I don't. My memory isn't as good as sign. I just remember major things. I do remember in another room in the same building seeing beds like cots thrown around as well that had the ties that tie down arms and legs. That night, I don't remember any specific noises or anything, although it was creepy and seemed weird that it was deserted and never properly cleaned out. I had much more horrifying experience a few months later, which ended our regular trips as well as everyone else that was with us. There was at least a dozen of us this time. We all met up rowdy and excited and decided to go through an underground tunnel. A few of us, like myself and my friend Eddie, who was that one obsessed, already knew the way. We went into the 2-story building through a door that was always open as usual. Before we went into the tunnels that went underground, we wanted to make sure there were no homeless people or anyone at all on the second floor that could follow us down. We all went up. Only 2 to 3 of us had flashlights, me being one. We got up there. It's just one floor completely. Open, you can see from one side of the building to the other. Not too big. On one side, directly across from the stairs, there is a loading dock garage-like door. We decided it's clear. We can go to the tunnels. As we're about to descend to the tunnels, we hear what clear footsteps on the stairs. Everyone in the group on the other side of the building going into the tunnels. There's no way it was one of us. It creeps us all out and we go back up as a group and check for someone. But nothing. We go back to the tunnels and this happens again. We go up again. This time though, we're all just reaching the top of the stairs when the loading dock door starts shaking and banging and slamming so hard and so loud. Everyone was screaming at the top of our lungs. One of us put the flashlight on the door and what looked like arms between wrists and elbows in the windows of the door, slamming the door. But they were like glow-in-the-dark white needles to say no one had ever been so scared. We all ran out of there in seconds, and what freaked us out the most, though, was when we ran out of the building. We had to pass the loading dock door to leave. We hadn't noticed it on the way in because it's high off the ground and nowhere to stand. The trucks must have backed right into the building to unload, and not only that, there was a brick layer over the door on the outside. What that was, no one knows. I ran into someone about 10 years later that was with me that night, and the first thing he said was, to me, Kaylee, I've been waiting years to talk to someone about this and I haven't, but I know you were there. Do you remember the night at Paul Deaver? I guess everyone's city isn't haunted. I guess this isn't normal. Reading these stories, I realize we are very special and are a witness to some otherworld explainly events. Why us? Was it? What is it? And what was there? Story number 3. I have heard about the Bridgewater Triangle before and thought it was a word of mouth type of thing. It wasn't until today I discovered your channel and I'd like to provide my eyewitness accounts. I'd like to leave this as anonymous, but the location is okay to use. After looking into the triangle areas, perhaps its area is larger than one thought. Swansea, Massachusetts, summer of 1998, roughly 9 p.m. My friend's father just bought him a telescope. It was a clear late summer night and we were going to look at the moon and stars. We were at my house and he ran across the street to his house to go get the telescope. As I'm outside waiting for him, I'm looking up at the night sky, scoping for areas we can look at. As I'm doing this, I am watching what I thought to be an airplane. The airport is about 30 miles from my house, so I'd seen airplanes above my area all day, all of my life. I was familiar with their flight patterns, but this one seemed off, with its lights and directions, so I continued to watch. The lights seemed as if they kept shortening out. Picture a flashlight flickering and shortening out to dead batteries. This would happen in random formations on this craft, which I couldn't even make out a shape to. Much different than the steady blinking lights I'm used to. It then seemed to have stopped in place and hovered for what was probably like a minute, but felt like 10. At this point, all the lights are on a steadily in a triangle pattern. I think, okay, maybe it is just a plane. 2 wing lights and 1 up front, but where are the rest? From a point of standstill, this craft took off like nothing I've ever witnessed for speed in the sky. It took off to the point I could barely see but one solid light which looked no different than a star in the night sky. I would have lost complete sight of it if it hadn't seemed to be a bright flickering light. From this point, it flew back in the direction it came from, in unbelievable speeds. It looked like the Starship Enterprise taking off in a light speed. It's the only way I could describe it. All I saw was a quick flash of light from its stopping point back to the point I first saw it, and that's it. It was just gone. Now, when I tell anyone this story, I tell them the whole thing about this telescope because I want to tell it truthfully from what happened, how it came to happen. I think people discount it because of being a kid and just over anxious to look at cool things in the sky. The memory of that moment has always been clear in my mind. When I relive it, I definitely saw what I described, just don't know what it was. Swansea, Mass, fall of 1999, roughly 2 a.m. My second account of a UFO sighting. I was woken up by my brother very early in the morning. Our bedrooms were side by side, and the windows to our bedrooms faced the same direction. Talking out from his window, my brother woke me up, and I went to my window to see what was up. He immediately directed me to look toward a strange shape in the sky. It didn't take too long to find it. In the distance, it appeared to be a long cigar-shaped object slowly floating in the sky. This thing had a steady movement like an airplane, but seeming to be moving so much slower like a cloud. I almost thought it was a cloud at first, but its shape and streamlined movement told me otherwise, as well as the fact over clouds didn't even seem to be moving at all. This object kept going and then just seemed to vanish within the night's clouds. This experience was amazing as I shared this with someone else. It wasn't just my own eyes possibly deceiving me or my own mind trying to mess me up. This really happened. Story number 4. Okay, so I lived in Middleborough, Mass, and I am 16. And since I was young, I have seen and heard and talked to ghosts and family members that have passed away, even people that I don't know. And when I was there, according to my parents, I said something about how I've had past lives and that me and my parents had died in a car accident, and I used to talk to my Uncle Joe who died when I was like 6. And a while before, I used to talk to my mom's grandmother, who I didn't really know when I was younger. And I can still sense their presence around me and my family. And then when I was 7, I was diagnosed with diabetes. I could see so many people in my family that had died before in the room watching over me and my family, and they made me feel calm. In the last year, I saw a strange big ape-like creature behind my house, and there is an animal sanctuary across the street from my house. A few months ago, me and the guy next door were watching these strange lights in the sky. And it's so hard to type about all the details about what happened, but I wish I had a really good video camera. I would have videotaped it because it was so exciting. We stood there in his yard watching 5 mysterious lights for like 30 minutes. The light would get really bright, then start to go away. It kept doing it for so long, and when the clouds moved, it was when we saw the strange objects in the sky. I know most people won't believe me, but I don't care what they think or say, because I know what I saw and what really happened, and I am proud to say I am different. And I don't say my name because anyone in Middleborough could see this, and I don't want to be bullied more than I have been.